Let me tell you why you hate cooking. You hate cooking because you have a bad knife. And to be honest, I've thought of this many times when I go to friends' houses and they ask me to chop a vegetable and I start using their knife and it's atrocious. And I think the reason why that so many bad knives are marketed to people out in the world, something I've considered many times, is because it's one of those things that company knows everybody needs at least one, and maybe more. Maybe they can sell you more. You know, it's like toilet paper. Everybody has to cook. So I want to walk you through some of the things to avoid, and I actually want to tell you what knives you actually need. But because despite the cooking shows that show the chefs unrolling a lot of knives, not all of those are used, especially if you're not working in a professional kitchen. And some of the knives, like for example, this is a knife that I use to fillet things. You're not going to need this until much later in your journey. So this chapter is going to be all about showing you what I have, what you need, and what to avoid. Because if you have a great knife, you are really going to love cooking. And if you don't have a great knife, it's such a chore. It's one of those things where you can't imagine why anybody would like to do this for very long. So let's talk about the knives I have and the knives that you actually need to buy. So what should you be looking for in a knife then? Okay, I'm going to give you some classic brands to stick to. Shun, which my husband tells me is pronounced Shun, but I'm Southern. There's going to be Wüsthof, classic German brand. Just look, it's a W. They pronounce it with a V. Then you've also got Global, which is a major knife brand. And then you've got it's smaller in the States, but it's not in Japan. It's called Kikuichi. And that's a Japanese brand that used to make samurai swords. They actually have that long of a history. Now I know there's probably could be a chef out there watching this saying, "Hey, you didn't say my favorite brand." There is more brands out there that I'm sure are perfectly suitable, but these are safe brands. I know that you can find them. I know that there are places where you probably shop or have access to. You can certainly pick them up on the internet, and you don't have to do any wading through, artisan knife makers. I promise you, you will love these brands. Second most important thing, if you cannot buy new, please buy used. My very first knife I got at a knife shop in San Antonio right after culinary school. It was a utility knife made by Kikuichi. I still have it and I still love it. Paid $70 for that knife, okay? So they sharpened it back to its perfect glory because a good knife shop should be able to do that for you. And I paid $70, okay? So all of these knife shops are going to be able to take really quality knives that someone had to trade in, someone had to sell. They sharpen them and they sell them for a fraction of the price. As I always say, when it comes to professional chef gear, used stuff is going to be so much better than new crap for you. I promise. If you take anything away from this course, please take that away from this. So let's talk about some of the no-nos when buying a knife. This is where it gets a little hairy. I would not recommend that you buy anything that a chef would not buy. I would not buy anything from major food channels endorsed by major celebrity chefs. I would not buy anything from major media corporations. These, to me, you're just not getting enough for your money. I know you can get more for your money than that. I also would stay away from these Instagram knife makers that are trying to charge $350 for a knife and no one knows who they are. I don't think that they're worth that much. They're probably much better than the stuff that you may find at Walmart or Target, but I just don't think $350 is what they are worth. Now this is where that you should be looking for knives. Please check local knife shops. Please, if you have the money, do Williams-Sonoma or Sur La Table. Like I said, it's a one-time purchase. It's a buy it for life item that you're going to be happy with. You can also go to all of the knife manufacturers' websites and get pretty good deals. The classic brands that I mentioned, they are going to have knife sets, sometimes with the chef knife and the paring knife, and you can get that for a really good deal. So ultimately, It's a place where you can really get in the weeds, but since this is a beginner's course, if you just stick to those classic brands, which we've listed below for you, you're gonna be safe. And please don't mess out on going to those local knife stores where they have bought a knife, they've resharpened it for you, and you can buy a classic brand at an excellent price. Okay, now let's take an up-close look at some of the knives that I'm going to recommend you start shopping for. The first knife, of course, being the chef's knife or a French knife. The most popular length on these is 10 inches, and this is going to be your Harry Potter wand that does almost everything for you. This is the most important knife you will ever buy, and it is the one purchase that will completely change your cooking experience to the most positive that it can be. It is an item that you can and should pass on to your offspring. If you do this purchase correctly, you're never going to have to buy another knife in your entire lifetime unless you want to. You'll just go in and get it sharpened periodically from time to time when you know that it needs it. Some people prefer a Santoku knife as a substitute for the traditional chef knife. Blades are usually 5 inches to 7 inches long and have these indentions on the side, which are supposed to prevent veggies from stacking up next to the blade of the knife. In my experience, I'm not sure how well that works, but it does look really cool. Now, this is the steel. You do need the steel. You've probably seen chefs using these in movies. This is not a sharpener per se. It's used to true the edge, which means to smooth out irregularities and maintain the edge at the correct angle. If you use your steel enough, you're rarely going to have to sharpen your knife. The second knife you're going to look for is a paring knife or a utility knife. This is just going to be a smaller version of the big guy. Paring knives are going to be 2 to 4 inches, while utility knives are going to be 6 to 8 inches. It's slender and it's really useful for smaller slicing like fruit or lettuce. Now, if you were stuck on a deserted island, you could still use your chef knife for all of these things, but it's nice to have a tiny version of the chef knife. The third knife in order of most importance is going to be the serrated knife. Serrated knives are for cutting tomatoes and slicing bread. That's why I say it's third on the list, but it's pretty hard to slice bread without a serrated knife, to be honest. When it comes to your serrated knife, I fall into line with Anthony Bourdain's line of thinking and say that there's no reason to buy an expensive brand. Any serrated knife will do, and when you start to feel like it's dulling, you'll replace it with a new one. These 3 knives along with this steel is all you will ever need in the home kitchen. Okay, so I would really be remiss if I did a knife chapter without talking to you about the ongoing discussion about German versus Japanese. You're going to hear all chefs and foodies talk about this, so I might as well tell you what we're talking about because you're one of us now. So when it comes to German knives, they're world renowned. They were probably the first on the scene. And what you'll find in a German knife is its hardiness. It's heavier in your hand, so the first week of using it probably have just a little bit of wrist. I don't want to say pain, but you'll know there's something going on there. It never chips. I've never thrown it into a drawer by accident and had anything on the sides chip. It needs to be sharpened more often, but this is a beast. It's like having a little bitty axe, and you'll know that most of the culinary schools in America, at least, give German knives out to the students. At least they did 10 years ago. I don't know what they did now. Now we'll talk about Japanese, these sexy little beasts, okay? So most of the Japanese knife makers started out as samurai sword makers, which I think is so cool. They're incredibly sharp. Not that German can't be sharp, it's just that Japanese knives tend to keep their blade. You don't have to sharpen them as much. They're very lightweight, which makes them nice for women. And you can just kind of see how this was used as a weapon. Now, the one problem that Japanese knives do have is that they can get little chinks taken out of them very easily. And I didn't even know why the very first time I was working at a bed and breakfast in Galveston, and they let somebody into the kitchen to cook that was not affiliated with me in any way, and they threw my knife into a drawer, and it still has little chinks out of it to this day. Heartbreaking. You can actually go to a really good knife guy and get those taken out, but you're going to take a lot off your blade as well. So what do I choose? I personally love Japanese knives, but I would never get rid of my German knives. I know that kind of makes no sense, but you really have to hold them to tell the difference. Here's another German. And you can see it's just so strong. It's so strong, you'll have to sharpen it more, but after I teach you how to sharpen knives, that won't be an issue for you. And this is going to cut through bone. It is going to do anything that you need it to do, and relatively without you worrying about hurting it. Japanese knives are obviously very sexy. very lightweight, don't have to sharpen them as much, but again, more delicate. So it's not one or the other. It's really up to you, and you may choose to have several different ones in your drawer. That is going to be the discussion when you hear chefs debating Japanese knives or German knives. So now we're going to talk about some of the ways that we can store our knives. And depending on how you like to store your knife, it's probably going to depend on how much you use it, what you do for a living. The number one way that I love to store my knives is using one of those magnetic strips on a wall. You can get those magnetic strips at IKEA for about $9. You just screw both sides in, and then you literally walk up to your knife and place it, and it goes and it magnetizes, because of course it's a magnet. So that is my number one way of storing your knife. The second option that you have that we use in our home because we don't have a wall that we can drill into is going to be a box, and it has just like really tight material that places each knife in, and then that box is basically indestructible. You can put it in any drawer you like, and you're going to be able to find these online, Bed Bath & Beyond, kitchen stores. So those are always going to be a good place if you don't have a wall where you can install a magnetic strip. Now let's talk about when I travel, because I do go to a lot of food shows. Maybe you're a caterer, maybe you just want to take your knife with you on vacation. I hate the knives you see at Airbnbs. So I think it's really important for you guys to know that they have these knife sleeves that you can use, and they'll all be on based on inches, because you want it to fully cover the knife. Okay, so here's a longer one for our 7 or 8 inch knives, and they just go like this. These can be put in the dishwasher. I just put them in the top rack, not the bottom rack, with really good success. And then you can take this anywhere. If you want something a little bit more heavy duty, they have these. And of course, chefs are always getting cool gadgets like this. So if you're going to be keeping your knife in your toolkit like I do, show you that later. You might want to get something a little bit more heavy duty like this, but ultimately these are all available online, and you definitely want to use these when you're investing $500 in knives like I have, and like I'm sure you will be at least buying one knife in the near future.